Hey team, got another great question from Carlos Nunez, great supporter of the channel. He says, great information. Meanwhile, you said that every 2 weeks a long run should be at target pace. How about the following week? Should we increase the miles because it is at a slower pace? Thanks in advance. I ended up responding to him, and what I wrote was, well, for the first 4 to 6 weeks of any buildup, you should be focused mainly on easy long runs and then start implementing faster, varied pace, more specific type running every other week, not every 2 weeks, okay? As I said here, also, you can increase the miles by a couple or a few if needed at slower paces. Yes, but depends on how you're feeling and progressing. So that's kind of the mindset I have, at least what helped me in the marathon distance and in these longer races. I had to get beyond running just long, slow, and easy every single weekend, okay? The faster you're trying to run over these longer races, the 10 mile, 25K, 20K, half marathon, the more specific the training has to become. And yes, you still can build an enormous amount of fitness and endurance by just running long, slow, long runs every single weekend. As long as you're still focusing on speed, you're doing some VO2 max workouts each week, you're doing tempo runs, getting that tempo run, especially if you're training for the half marathon and marathon, you want to work your way up to, for the half marathon, I would work for tempo runs around 8 to 9 miles, and the marathon working up to around 10 to 14 miles in length. Again, the longer we can spend training at our anaerobic threshold, the more you improve your body's lactate tolerance, your ability to clear lactic acid more effectively as you're running at goal race pace. And again, a lot of times it's just improper pacing. If you're having issues in the half marathon distance, it's tough because you have to really you really have to have a pre-plan going into the race and not run and not run into the trap of running someone else's race. And so these long runs is your bread and butter when it comes to really improving. Even if you're training for a 5K or 10K, you do not want to get in the habit of just running slow every single weekend, okay? You do want to focus on easy, long runs in the early build-up phase, okay? My philosophy with training plans and my running courses really is a 4-part process, okay? The first process is if it's, say, a 20-week build-up, the first 5 weeks should be focused on more of an aerobic phase where you're running aerobic mileage, building your endurance, doing some strides 2 to 3 times a week, 50 meters to 100 meter strides. Maybe it's 4 to 5 reps. Then we go more into, the next 5 weeks would be more specific race or more specific type workouts, getting closer to, but not quite at goal race pace workouts. Where we're starting to build more anaerobic fitness, but really building more stamina. And then we move, the next 5 weeks is more race specific / speed training. Okay, this is where we're really working on VO2 max workouts, longer tempo runs, much faster, more aggressive long runs. And then the last 5 weeks is more, it's still a combination of the same. We're working on speed, more race-specific training, but the last 10 days of the build, the last 10 days of that last 5 weeks is the taper phase, where really it's the most difficult part because we've spent so much time doing long runs, as Carlos mentioned here, doing long runs on a consistent basis, doing tempo runs, working on our speed, working on hill repetitions. But a lot of times it's so difficult to back off, okay? And I've found in a lot of athletes that I've either coached personally or have one of my training plans or invested in a running course, which all end with a training plan. They've never really focused. They've not always done 10-day tapers. They've done 3-week tapers. So I've found, and a lot of other athletes that I've worked with have found that doing a 10-day taper is sufficient time for your body to fully adapt to what you've been throwing at it, okay? So that's kind of the philosophy in terms of the build-ups And yes, it varies a little bit from athlete to athlete. Some athletes work much better with much less mileage versus other athletes that have to do much more volume. Okay, but what I want, in terms of doing long runs, recovery is key. Okay, especially these longer, varied pace long runs that I talked about with Carlos here. After you've spent several weeks building your aerobic mileage, and you've spent time doing your long runs easy and relaxed so that you build the endurance, then you start implementing faster, varied pace workouts. For me, one of my favorites was doing a 24 miler, and I would drop every fifth mile of that 24 miler under 5-minute mile pace, run like a 452 to 457 range every fifth mile of that 24 mile long run. Then I would go back into more reasonable paces, 6:30s, 7-minute pace. Then dropping a few miles or kilometers at like 5:20s, 5:30s pace. So again, you're varying the paces. You're running at different energy. You're stressing different energy systems of the body as you're running these longer, varied pace long runs. That is going to teach your body and teach you mentally to handle pace changes in the races. It's going to help you also to get that goal race pace, whatever it is, whether you're training for a 5K, a 10K, half marathon, whatever it is. It's going to eventually get that goal race pace to feel much easier for you. And not just doing these varied pace long runs, but also your speed workouts where it's really going to count, where you're running at paces that you can only handle for a few seconds to a few minutes versus doing more anaerobic threshold type training where you can run for maybe up to an hour or even further, running at still aggressive paces, but not so fast that you're forced to slow down. Okay, because again, we can go out and run easy, relaxed long runs without too much of an issue, depending on your fitness. Even earlier on in a build-up, as we all know, it's very hard even to run easy for 10 miles at the beginning. But generally, we can handle that because our body's only producing a small amount of lactic acid. Versus when you're running at faster paces, more oxygen is required. You're building up more inflammation. You're building up much more lactic acid. So it's much more of a hassle, much more of a difficult task to run doing varied pace long runs. That's why I always preach, first, build your endurance. Build your aerobic base first, before you even think about doing these faster, varied pace long runs that Carlos mentioned. But he did say, you said that every 2 weeks a long run should be at target pace. Actually, I said every other week you should have a long run with portions of your long run at goal pace, or portions of that long run at faster than goal race pace. As I mentioned, doing that 24 miler, every fifth mile, I would drop a sub 5-minute mile at 6,000 feet elevation. Because again, I was living in high altitude. My goal was to run 5:25 mile pace or faster for the marathon distance. Okay, that was 2 hours, 22 minutes. In 2008, it was a USA Track and Field Olympic Trials B standard time. It was the minimum time needed to compete in the Olympic trials. Okay, the A standard back then was 2 hours, 20 minutes flat, or 5:20 per mile. So you can see the reasoning behind dropping some sub 5-minute miles in the middle of a 24 miler, then going back into 5:20s pace, 6:0s, 7:30s to 8-minute mile pace, some jogging section or some slower paces, still quality running, but spending some varied paces along the way and not just running slow and monotonous the whole way. Okay, there is a place for that. And I said, as I mentioned to Carlos here, one weekend should be easier and relaxed. The next weekend, a little bit more challenging. But expect that you will need, it may happen, it happened for me, you may need up to 3 days of easy jogging after you do these harder, varied pace long runs. Without a doubt, the hardest workout I did over the years, even in my prime, was the long run. This varied pace long run strategy. That is what helped me go from a 2:43.36 in my debut to a 2:19.35. And yes, I got beat just like anybody else on the track and on the roads when I was in high school, when I was in college, when I was running professionally. Nobody gets to the next level in this sport without experiencing failures, okay? And everybody loves to talk about successes. But I will preach this. I failed several times over the years on the track, on the roads, got beat, really questioned what I was doing. And that's why you really have to have a strong belief in and desire for what you're doing as a middle distance to long distance runner. But I hope this answers the question. I know it can get long-winded sometimes, but I do get excited about answering questions and hopefully saying something that will impact you as a middle to long distance runner. I don't want you to even think about doing these very pace long runs until you've spent several weeks building your fitness, strengthening your tendons, strengthening your ligaments, your tendons, and building that aerobic foundation that you have to have before you can even think about start doing these faster, very pace long runs. So, Carlos, I hope that answered your question. I do know that I left you a comment, and I appreciate your response there. But for the good of the community, I want to make a video too, adding on to what was written here. And again, great question, Carlos. I appreciate it. Wish you all the best in your own training as well. And if any of you have any other questions regarding whatever distance, whether it's the mile, the 1,600 meter, 9 meters short of a mile, 800 meters. I mean, I've run a lot of different distances over the years, and hopefully I can help you with any question you have. So thanks again for all of your support. Check out the resources below or on RunDreamAchieve.com. Thanks for liking and sharing my videos. I really appreciate all of you, and I will talk to you all in the next video.